Hey y'all!
I'm Jessica the coolest.
Hey y'all! I'm Lucas. I'm an artist that likes to make sparkly illustrations and goofy character designs. I like to draw whatever the hell I want, and I can almost never stick to one thing. Today, I want to take y'all through my art process! Like every artist out there, I have my own way of doing things when it comes to my art. So I thought it'd be cool if I talk about my process. Who knows, maybe you'll even learn something. Real quick before we begin though, let me talk about how this is going to work. We'll be breaking this up into sections. Those sections being brainstorming, sketch, line art, coloring, rendering, finishing touches, and critique. Not only that, but I'll be making a completely new illustration just for this video. I'll explain a little more about that in the first section. So without further ado, let's move on to the first section.
Brainstorming.
Okay, so what the hell am I going to be drawing? Well, dear viewer, I'm going to be drawing Pokemon. I'm a big Pokemon fan, and recently I've had a bit of a Pokemon brain rot, so let me talk about Pokemon now.
Here's all my Pokemon plushies. Here's my Pokemon amiibos. These are my Pokemon enamel pins. These are all the games I own. This is my favorite Pokemon. My favorite type is Steel. My favorite games are Sun and Moon. My favorite region is Alola, and this is my big sweaty guardian alpha boyfriend.
Anyway, getting back on track, what I'll be doing exactly is drawing my trainer Sona with my favorite legendary Pokemon. What's a trainer Sona, you ask? Well, it's literally just me if I was a Pokemon trainer. This is my trainer Sona, and here's a ref sheet I made for it too. I made it a while ago so that I'm able to insert myself into any Pokemon related drawing I want. It looks exactly like me, doesn't it? The Pokemon I'll be drawing with me is Necrozma, but not just any Necrozma, a shiny Necrozma. But not just any shiny Necrozma, a shiny Ultra Necrozma. Now I want to take this opportunity to show my own shiny Necrozma that I named Necruma. Isn't it just adorable? It may be a violent and malevolent force hell-bent on consuming all the light in the universe, but damn it if I don't love it like a child. I love you so much. Mwah. What I want to do for this drawing is Ultra Necrozma using its signature Z move, Light That Burns the Sky, or Heaven's Scorching Light of Destruction if you live in Japan. So we'll be going with that. Now that I have an idea of what I'm going to do, it's time to gather some reference images. When I do fan art, I usually just scroll Google Images for good references most of the time. The amount of references I collect varies from drawing to drawing, although typically for me, the more vivid my idea is, the less I'll need. Now that I've collected all my references, I can put them into Procreate, which is the program I use for most of my art. Before I get into the thumbnails, I'm going to do a few practice doodles to teach myself how to draw Ultra Necrozma. I've never drawn Ultra Necrozma up to this point before, so you're going to be seeing me do a bunch of these here. I'm really just trying to understand how the hell his body works. You could probably tell that I'm really struggling here, because, I don't understand how the hell its head works, but obviously I start to loosen up over time, and then I actually start to understand it. You'll see me struggle a lot more once we get to the actual sketch, though. Now that I'm all warmed up, I can get into the actual thumbnail sketches now. This is the most important part of brainstorming for me because it's going to be the basis of the whole drawing, and it also helps me out with the sketch a lot. What I usually do for thumbnail sketches is I split the canvas into 4 quadrants so I can make 4 thumbnails, although sometimes I don't even end up using all 4 quadrants because I'm happy with a thumbnail I came up with already. These drawings aren't meant to be anything special or even good. I'm only really trying to get the basic idea out as fast as I can. Here are the thumbnail ideas I ended up with. I ended up not needing all 4 quadrants like I said before because I was already happy with something I came up with. I think I'm going to be going with a fusion of these two because I like how I look in this one, but I also like how Necrozma looks in this one. So at this point in the script, I talk about how I'm going to use a reference of myself, but I end up never using it. So I'm just going to say this part anyway because I think it's helpful, but I assume it's pretty common among artists, but if you haven't, I highly recommend using yourself as drawing reference. I do it really often, and it's such a huge help when I struggle drawing a certain pose, and especially when it comes to drawing hands. With all that mind-numbing brainstorming out of the way, we can finally move on to the sketch. Oh boy, the sketch. This is probably the most time-consuming part for me since it could take days or even weeks. The sketch is arguably even more important than the thumbnails for me because any mistakes in the sketch will show up in the final piece, so it's important to iron them out now. When it comes to sketching, I like to draw in red pen. Any secondary items like clothing or accessories, I draw in a different color so I don't confuse myself. Oftentimes, my sketches end up more colorful than they should be, which can get really distracting sometimes. When it came to Necrozma's upper body, I didn't really struggle too much. I kind of cruised along. I adjusted a little more as it progresses, but it wasn't really that hard. When it got to the lower body is when I really struggled, and at this point is when I started banging my head on the wall because I didn't want to draw this anymore. But that's just like the phase that I go through every sketch. I don't know why the legs were so hard for me to draw. I just really struggle when it comes to more animalistic or digigrade legs. I absolutely hate drawing them. I could just not understand them. They do not develop in my brain box. The footage doesn't do it justice, but I struggled drawing the legs for probably at least 2 hours, but you only get to see like 30 seconds of it. It was awful, let me tell you. After finishing Necrozma, I move into my actual trainer Sona. This part is a lot easier because I'm familiar with drawing people, so I just kind of cruise along. I finish it pretty fast. I struggle here and there, and I also forgot this crucial detail that will show up later in the drawing because I finished the drawing realizing that I had forgotten it, but you'll see later. I end up putting this jagged line in the background just to have an idea of where I wanted to start because it's just a bunch of jagged mountains because that's how it looks in the background of the Z move, but we're gonna leave it like that for now. And with all that, here's the final sketch. Now we can move on to the line. Whoa, hold up. We gotta bring something up first. Once the sketch is done, this drawing can go 2 ways, and those ways are the way of line art or lineless. Line art consists of me drawing it with lines, obviously, while lineless is without lines, giving it a softer feel compared to my line art. For this drawing, I'll be going the way of line art as I feel it saves some time and it's also faster to do. And it also pads out the video's runtime. But if I were going to do lineless, I would completely skip the line art part and go from sketch straight to coloring. Can I speak now? Yes, you may. With that out of the way, we can finally move on to the line art. The line art phase is probably my favorite part next to coloring. It's my favorite part because it's something I feel makes my art stand out. One of my biggest inspirations for my art is Sonic the Hedgehog himself, specifically the art from the game Sonic Battle. The line work in that game's art style really struck a chord with me when I was younger, so I picked it up and adapted it into my own art style. The line art is pretty straightforward. I just trace over the sketch, but because of my art style, it's a little more than that. I like to make my lines bold and sharp, just like the Sonic Battle art style, so I always overshoot my lines, and then I erase any excess to clean it up and sharpen it. To put it simply, I'm allergic to round lines, unless I'm feeling quirky that day, I don't know. This drawing has some pretty strong foreshortening, so what I do is I make the lines a lot bolder and thicker the closer they are to the camera and thinner the farther away they are. You can tell because the lines I draw on the hands are a lot thicker than they are on the rest of my body. The line art on Necrozma was a little different compared to the line art on my trainer Sona. Because Necrozma is really weird looking, I had to break it up into a few different parts. I broke it up between its head, its body, and its wing appendage looking things, just to make it easier for myself because line art can get really hard sometimes and it's a little frustrating when I'm drawing on the same layer and then I erase a line but then it erases everything else, So I just make it easier for myself. Once I finish the line art for Necrozma, I end up going in and coloring the light parts of his body white because he has 2 parts to his body, the crystal parts and the actual light parts, so I just want to differentiate it so it could help me later on. After maybe 2 or 3 hours, I don't know, line art doesn't take me that long. It's finally done. Now we can move on to coloring. To be a little more specific, this section is about flat colors, and it might actually be my favorite part when it comes to my art. Flat colors really just means filling in the base colors of the drawing, no shading or rendering or lighting or anything. I like this part because along with my line art, the flat colors leaves a simple and clean look to the drawing that I just love. Sometimes I don't even want to continue with the rendering. I love the look so much. Here's some examples of some older drawings. I also like it because I don't really have to use my brain, but don't tell anyone. For my trainer Sona, all I have to do is color pick the color palette I made for it since the colors are just right there. As for Necrozma, I pretty much do the same thing and color pick the references I saved with some slight adjustments to the colors to better fit the drawing. I've heard some people are against just using the eyedropper for grabbing colors, but to be honest, I don't really care, so I'm gonna do it anyway. I'm not like other girls, Brittany. This part is like really quick and fast. It does not take me long at all. What I do when I'm coloring in a drawing is because my line art is closed, like there's no openings or anything, I can just select it, invert the selection, and then just fill it with the base color and then color it from there. It's really easy. It takes me absolutely no time. And that's why I love doing my line art because it makes coloring so much easier. I also think this is a good time to mention what's going on with the background. So originally when I was planning out the idea for this drawing, I was going to give line art to the background. I usually do line art for backgrounds a lot of the time, but as I worked on this drawing, I started to realize that I don't enjoy doing line art for backgrounds. So from this point on, I erased the line art that I did give the background and I end up doing the whole thing in the rendering section just because it saves me the headaches, honestly. After probably less than an hour, the flat colors are done and we can move on to the rendering. Rendering is where all the magic happens. This is where I do all the shading, lighting, and textures. It's a pretty straightforward process, but if you don't have a plan going into it, it could be much harder. Good thing I have a plan. The first thing I always do for this part is I insert a temporary light source, but I'm not doing that because Necrozma is literally the light source because he is a creature made out of light. I pulled a few more references that I didn't pull up in the earlier part of the video. I just went to like a YouTube video of someone playing Sun and Moon and using light that burns the sky. I was able to grab a few references that I needed for the background and stuff, and I end up using these references later for the finishing touches part 2. I start with the sky for the rendering because skies are usually pretty easy. It's usually just a bunch of gradients and stuff. I used a bunch of different textured brushes because I didn't know what I wanted to go for. After I finished the sky, I moved on to the actual terrain. I split this up into 3 layers, a foreground, a middle ground, and a background. They are all 3 different colors to show that atmospheric perspective, if you will. I love using that word. It makes me feel so smart. I go in and add a bunch of textures and stuff after a few color adjustments. I also started using the curves function for the first time because I learned it in my Photoshop class. I still don't really understand how it works, but it did help me with the drawing a bit, so it's okay. The terrain is really rocky, and usually I would just use a textured brush for this, but I really wanted to give it like a hand-painted look, so I went in and drew all the rock textures myself. It took a while. I'd say this also took probably 2 hours, maybe. I went in with like a darker color of the base color, and then I went in with a third one that isn't as visible and it doesn't cover as much land. After I finished the first layer of the rock texture, I warped it a little bit to fit the perspective better. I pretty much did the same thing to the 2 layers of rock behind the first layer, and then after that I put like this rock texture on top of everything just to give it a little more because it looked flat. This is the part where I get into the actual rendering of me, my trainer Sona, and Necrozma. I start with the lighting because there is a lot of light in this drawing, so it's important to get that out of the way. Usually when it comes to a drawing, I start with the shading and then I do the lighting, but like I just said, there's a lot of light in this drawing, so we're gonna start with that. I don't know why I started making the lighting blue around me, probably because Necrozma has a bit of a blue tint to it because of its shiny, but it's really supposed to be a yellow light because the Z power in the games is like this yellowish green. So I end up realizing that I'm a bimbo and I change it afterwards. And speaking of that yellow glow, I have to give Necrozma that glow too because he's supposed to have that yellow glow. So to the crystal parts, I give him that yellow rim, and I also give it to the white parts, but not as much because it is made of light. So having 2 things glowing on top of each other would be a little much. And speaking about the glow effect, it's really easy to do. I just use the bloom and then it makes it like really pretty, and you can actually start to feel the light coming off of it now. So I had screen recorded almost 2 hours of footage of me shading my trainer Sona, but as I saved the video clip, my iPad decided to say F you and not save the footage, so I lost all the footage for me shading my trainer Sona. But all I could say is that when it comes to shading, I use a multiply layer with a color that I think fits the drawing, and that's pretty much it. You just need to have a good understanding of shape and form. And with all the rendering out of the way, we're almost done. Now we can get into the finishing touches. The finishing touches is a really fun part for me to do because I get to make it so preppy.
It's so preppy in here.
The finishing touches varies for each of my pieces, so I'll just explain as the footage plays. Sometimes it's just little effects here and there, and other times it could take as long as the sketching process. But in short, it can be anything that makes the drawing look as good as possible. For this drawing, it mostly consists of light effects and sparkles and all that pretty stuff. In the animation for the Z move, there's a lot of light effects that I want to replicate, so that's what this section is mostly going to be dedicated to. This is where those references for the background come in handy because they also contain all the light effects that I wanted to use. For the ball of light that Necrozma creates, I started with a regular green circle and then I bloomed it to make it look like it was glowing, and that was already pretty similar to the actual game. All I had to do from then on is add all the pretty light effects and stuff. I started with the swirling one around it. All that took was an ocean brush, and then I just liquefied it in like a swirling motion, and that was very, very close to the game. I then went in and added a bunch of little dashes of light around the thing, some in blue, some in purple, and some in like the yellow-green, which I then applied a motion blur effect to make it look like it was going into the orb of light. In the animation for the Z move, it also looks like that Necrozma is pulling the light outside of the ground itself. So I turned off Necrozma for a second so I could add those little things of light. It was a little tricky to do, but I was able to figure it out somehow. After that, it was just a bunch of different brush effects that I used. I also added a bit of chromatic aberration to those light dashes, and that really made it look awesome, if I do say so myself. But anyway, we finally made it. It's done! For the most part. You can't see it yet. There's one more part I haven't mentioned, and that part is the... All that's left for this drawing is the critique. I've gathered a few friends of mine to critique this drawing before I post it to my Instagram. @GuyThatArts, you should definitely follow me. I never do critiques when it comes to personal art, so we're gonna see how this goes. Please be gentle, it's my first time. Anyway, enough of my yapping. Let's get into the critique. You guys have the stage. So, what do you think?
Hey bestie. Okay, let's see. Oh, I think the colors suck. They're so dull. I don't like them. They should make them more croquette and do thinner lines because those are some fuck ass thick ass lines. But oh my god, I love how it looks, bestie. Keep it up.
It's okay. I mean, it could use a little more Charizards, but it's okay.
Oh my god, wow, it looks so good if you squint your eyes, break your back, and twist your neck 360 degrees. Maybe then it won't look like such a steaming pile of shit.
What was the question?
With that final hurdle out of the way and 22 hours and 36 minutes later, I'm finally finished. Here it is. I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. That thing I mentioned earlier about missing a detail, that ended up being the curl that comes out of my trainer Sona's hair. I don't know why I forget that detail so much because it's so distinct and I think it's really cute. And I just forget it all the time, and my friends always like to drag me for it. Everyone is so mean to me. But anyway, thanks for listening to me yap about my art. It's one of my favorite things to do. If you're an artist and you learned something from this video, I hope it helps you in the long run. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a date with my Pokemon boyfriend that doesn't exist. I am extremely delusional. And with that, I'm Jessica the Coolest.
Peace, y'all!
Hi there, viewer. Thanks for watching my video. I really appreciate it. If you really like my art or like any of my content, I'd say follow my Instagram @GuyThatArts. Also, I want to say thanks to my friends Hoodie, Omar, Kaden, and Isabel. They helped me with those little title cards that you see at the beginning of each section. I asked them if they could help me just do some little doodles that were relating to the title, like brainstorming. We just gave them all big brains. It was just fun. We just got to draw Pokemon for like a few days straight. You should go follow them on Instagram. Here are all their ats. They also let me use their Trainer Sona designs because we're all in a bit of a Pokemon brain rot right now. So yeah, you should go follow them. They have cool art. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and I'll see you sometime. Bye.
Give me my lime.